Alright, would you guys quietly come up to the carpet, please? Okay, so yesterday, do you guys remember the different types of stories that we were talking about? There was 4 of them that we were talking about. Annabelle.
Fables.
So we talked about fables. What's another one? Mia?
Legends.
Talked about legends, okay. Haley, what's another?
Myths.
Myths. And then what was the last one? Carter.
Folktales.
Folktales. So we talked about fables, folktales, myths, and legends. Can you guys remember what a fable is? How about you silently talk to a person beside you and talk to each other about what a fable is? And once you think you know, you can put your hand up.
It's a very short story. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys are ready. What is a fable, Keegan?
It's normally a short story, and it normally only has 2 to 3 characters.
Good, yes. A shorter story. It has 2 to 3 characters. Is it true or false? Skylar?
False.
Normally it's not a true story. Yeah, exactly. And also, we learned this yesterday as well. It teaches a lesson, but what do we call that instead of a lesson? It's the same thing as a lesson, but what do we call that? I'm going to call it a quiet hand. Peyton.
Moral.
We call that a moral, right? And you guys worked on that yesterday. Okay, so we learned what a fable is, and it seems like you guys remember that one pretty well. What about a folktale? Let's talk about that one real quick. Folktale. Talk to each other again. Once you think you know, raise your hand and let us know. Okay, I want to call somebody different. What's a folk tale? We gave some examples yesterday. Chance.
A folktale is something that's been passed on and told by other people.
Something that's been passed on and told.
Like
Okay.
Johnny Appleseed.
Okay, we talked about that yesterday, right, Destin? We talked about Johnny Appleseed, how it was passed on by word of mouth, right?
And it changes each time it gets told, like, he never jumped over the pile of it.
Exactly.
If he would danced his face, he would have been dead, or he would have been thrown away.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about that yesterday. We said that when you tell a story, or when you talk to somebody, as it gets passed on through person, sometimes it changes, right? We used a game telephone yesterday, that when you start at one end, normally it ends up something completely different. Sometimes it comes out perfect, like it did the other day. But other times it comes out, you could say dog, and someone could say pig. You know, it could be a completely different thing than what you talked about in the first place, right? Okay, let's talk about myth and legend, and then we'll move on. What?
Legend was that gets passed on.
We'll talk about that one. What is a legend? Talk about it to yourselves. I just flip back to it if you want to learn that. Okay, once you think you know, let me hear. Cameron.
A legend is something that's not real.
Something that's not real. Okay, let's think about it a little bit deeper. What else, Cassie?
A legend is sometimes real.
It can sometimes be real, about a real person. Okay, because we talked about yesterday, we talked about the word legend. can mean two different things. It can talk about somebody who's a legend, and that's different from than what a legend actually is. Here, we'll flip back to it. Let's go to what legend is. So, a legend, you can read it with me, combines
a real event with exaggeration and heroic actions.
Okay, so, Liam, clear up what you said. A folktale is actually what gets passed on by person to person. A legend combines sometimes a real event and then exaggerates it. So, like example, you could take somebody, like, you could take somebody and you could say that they were able to jump 30 feet high. Say they can jump pretty well, but if you say that they can jump 30 feet high, is that an exaggeration? Can anybody really jump 30 feet high? No. So that's kind of like what a legend is. All right, and a myth, we'll just move on to that one. A myth, let's read that together.
A story that gives reasons for certain events, such as rainbow seasons or how the world began. Myths about people explain good and bad behavior.
Okay, and what were two things that we talked about yesterday? There were two different types of myths that we kind of talked about. Annabelle, can you remember the one I gave? The example? Oh, opened up. No? Okay, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, like, the Mythbusters that we were talking about.
Okay, we did talk about Mythbusters, right? And how they try to break myths, right?
Yeah.
Bust them. Okay, Xavier, do you remember?
Pandora's box.
Pandora's box. Do you guys remember that? I said yesterday when that girl opened up Pandora's box to let out all the bad things in the world.